I want to welcome you to the sixth in our series of webinars about revenue recognition. My name is John Froelich, and I will be the moderator for today's session. So again, thank you for joining. I'm excited about today's topic. A little bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's session, so you will be able to go to our website and download the recorded version of this and our other webinars on revenue recognition. If you have any questions, you should be able to see on your dashboard a question module, and we will try to answer some of your questions throughout the broadcast. However, we will also be having a Q&A at the end, so any questions that come up that we get to at the end, that'll be great. In addition, we can follow up with you later on with regard to any questions. Quick reminder also that SAP ASUG Sapphire Now is coming up the week of May 16 to 19, and Bramisol will be there. And we look forward to meeting you there. Come by our booth. It's number 1080. In addition, we're giving a presentation on Thursday, May 19th from 11 to 12 o'clock. Further information and deep dives on the RAR, as well as some really great presentations with some Fiori tiles. I think you guys will really enjoy that. Today's topic is Bramisol SAP RAR Cloud Platform. It gets you up and running quickly. I'm really excited about this topic, primarily because as the VP of Sales, I speak a lot with customers. I hear customers, and a lot of them are concerned that they are already behind and wonder how do they get moving quickly. Or many of them are concerned because they don't have the latest version of SAP or they are on an alternate platform. They might be using Microsoft or Infor or Oracle as their ERP platform. And the great news here, and the purpose of this webinar, is to help you understand that SAP RAR can be used as a standalone engine, as well as by standing it up in a cloud-based environment, you can get up and running quickly. We have one customer who was able to get up and running and start playing with scenarios within a couple of days. So I think this is going to be a great opportunity. One thing I do want to note, by the way, is, with regard to getting up and running quickly, a recent poll by a large Big Four accounting firm indicated that less than 50% of companies have started their RAR projects, which puts them behind already. And in a recent blog by Larry McKinney, he noted that the head of the SEC accounting, the chief accountant for SEC, expressed some concern as to whether or not many companies will be able to meet the compliance regulations by January 1st, 2018 for public corporations. So again, I'm really excited about this opportunity for Chris to demonstrate how exactly you can use the SAP RAR engine as an engine, as a separate platform. So with that, let's get to it. Chris, I'm going to turn this over to you, and I thank everybody, and we'll take Q&A at the very end. So Chris, let's go.
All right. Okay, welcome everybody. This is Chris Ritterher, and glad to have you on our webinar today, and we're going to be going through a couple of items to give you a sense of using RAR as an engine. Again, my name is Chris Ritterher, and I'm Director of our Solution Architecture. Have been in the software business for quite a number of years, and specifically working a lot with SAP, and I've seen numerous companies and their different incantations of using SAP and the different aspects they use. Also joining us shortly will be Hans Christian Metz. He's our Senior Lead Consultant Architect and in charge of the team that's out there doing the deed, actually getting the software operational and installed and in place at various companies out there, including the live customers that we have out there today. Just briefly who we are, we will be sending out a copy of these slides via the our website. So if you register you'll also be apprised of that link. So by virtue of being registered and also or attending this webinar, you will receive that link. Our background is in strategic consulting. Specifically, we're now becoming a center of excellence for revenue accounting and revenue recognition, the new SAP module, which is in its current version of 1.1. We're establishing training and training academies, and also putting up quite a bit of expertise in terms of allowing people to actually use our best practice, industry practice systems as POCs, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So for today's webinar, just a quick brief review of RAR. It might be a little bit of a repeat for those who have been on some of our other webinars, so I will keep it brief. And then we have two different seminars, and then we'll talk about how you get started and some of the things you can do from that perspective. As John may have mentioned as we go through, if you have questions, please feel free to post them in the question block, and we'll our folks will either try to answer them as we go through, or we'll catch them at the end. Again, it's the revenue accounting regulations are coming. It's not a choice, and in fact, many companies are having to report in their current quarter on their 10Q what their plans are in terms of getting on the new revenue accounting regulations, and that footnote might be the effect of we have a plan and we're working it, as opposed to the gory details. But you are actually having to put something out in the public domain for public companies right now. So the challenge is getting started. And we're going to talk about using RA in a different functionality, RA standing for Revenue Accounting. Pardon my use of acronym there, but we will use it now. And we recommend a holistic approach. We find that this isn't so much as a software function as it's a company operation, and finance needs to lead the charge. So one of the key aspects to keep in mind when SAP put in RA is they wanted to make sure that to allow their customers to automate and simplify the new revenue accounting regulations. They wanted to take all those operational and transaction aspects, whether within SAP or outside of SAP, and let RA sort of take over the driving for them. And eventually RA will automatically make all the appropriate journal entries as per the new regulations for me. So once you get it over there, get it into the RA module, away it goes, and you're a happy camper, so to speak, because you've got that babysitting and making sure that you're regulatory compliant with all the audit functionality there is with that, and goes along with that as a responsible part of that. Okay, so one of the things to keep in mind for those who know RA, 5 steps, that's your life now. Identify, and I'm not going to spend, again, a lot of time on these slides. I'll just a brief reminder, perhaps for some of our newer attendees out there, so just to ode to you, there are 5 steps that you need to comply with. The software that SAP has developed is compliant with these 5 steps, and that is identifying the contract, what's called performance obligations, so you'll see what those look like. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but again, this is a little bit more advanced topic today, and looking at RA as opposed to RA itself and spending a lot of time in there. Determining what's called the standalone selling price, or the fair value, or the transaction price. You need to establish that now. That's something new. And then how those get recognized into the various performance obligations, and then the ongoing recognized revenue as the various obligations are satisfied. Simple example would be you have something that you're going to deliver in 3 months. You finally deliver it. That's a recognition event, so that's called event-based. Another example is I do a service that's prepaid up front across 12 months. So in RA, I create a time-based performance obligation that just sits there whenever that timer ticks off, makes the adjusting entries to GL to move it to sales revenue as opposed to deferred revenue. Okay, so let's get a little more into it. When we talk about RA as an engine, I need to spend just a little bit of time talking about the insides, the guts of what's going on out there. On the far left, under operational applications, where you see my mouse now, this is what's considered the operational side. It is not considered RA. So this is just where the source of the contracts are coming from. And the source can be SAP itself, or it can be external files, or it can be third-party systems. Third-party systems would be, again, by external files. And that's where we're going to be taking a look today, just to get a sense of what that's like. Once it goes over to SAP Revenue Accounting, there are a couple of major blocks that occur in there. One is what's called the adaptive reuse layer, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And then it actually gets over to the Revenue Accounting Engine, and that's where it lives and has life, and where I can look at it, and it goes through all the various steps it needs to go through to eventually where it posts out, so to speak. We talk about the adaptive reuse layer architecture. It's something that they've added to the revenue accounting functionality. And what's good about that particular capability is it allows me to really start to focus on how I can have SAP, let me just narrow this slide up a little bit, how I can use SAP, the revenue accounting, and the BRF Plus framework and have tight control of what is specifically deemed to be held in revenue accounting versus on the operational side. So you can think about revenue accounting as the holder of record as related to regulations to meet revenue, the new revenue regulations. So then the question becomes, what do I want it to hold? So that's what this adaptive reuse layer architecture allows me to specify. There's some defaults when coming from ECC, but if I'm coming from other systems, I can develop another architecture layer that allows me to specify what fields go across and how they live and specifically end up in the RA engine. But we'll be having a future seminar that's a little more technical, talking about this in more detail. Okay, so let's talk about sort of how things move over to RA, and this is sort of the standard world out there. One is we have our events, whether it's contract entered, changed, item fulfilled, return, clearing. It's contract ECC. And let me just hang on a second. There we go. Hans, if you're out there, I muted you, by the way. So the contract's created in ECC, a transfer routine occurs, and then away we go. But today, we're going to be looking at it from this perspective. It's going to be an external transaction or a contract to SAP. So in this case, a contract is created externally. We're using Excel files, by the way, as our example. I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. So the interface file is prepared in a sense, and then we do our transfer routine, and it goes into the RA module. So from that perspective, let's take a look at it. Now, just to let you know what we're operating against, we have our demo and our proof of concept systems up into the AWS cloud. We're running on an ECC 6.0. The RA module itself is considered an add-on, loads on top of that, so it's not a separate server, it's just a piece of software that we add on top of that. You do require a minimum of EHP 5, by the way, for those that want to know that, for your ECC 6.0 system in order to load RA. 1.1 is the most current version. Okay, so two scenarios. One is moving a project into RA from within ECC and also external, and then the second one is just we're just going to do the care and feeding of an RA contract strictly from an external event. So a series of external files are continually updated in the RA file, and we'll take a look at what that looks like and operates like. Just again, what is a performance obligation? Remember, under ASC 606, it's something that can be explicitly stated in a contract or can be implied. So just FYI, when you see a POB, you know what they look like. So this is what we're bringing across today. So my file is a project where the standalone selling price is the same as the project price. So somebody might ask, what does that look like exactly? So let's just take a quick look. So I'm going to be bringing this Excel file over, and here we go. This is my Excel file. And so this is just so you can say, yep, I saw the Excel file, and that's what he was going to be bringing over. So this is what it looks like. It's very straightforward. In this case, the first line is going to be used as a project ID in a field that we use. We put together a scenario so we can show companies who do projects how they can use RA today. Perhaps they're not using the SAP project system, or they're doing project-like things, which means they potentially have a deferred revenue, and if they do, this is an example of how they would operate that functionality. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. So let's get into the software and get after it, so to speak, so you can see what it looks like and how it operates. So here we go. I'm logged into my SAP system. Let me just expand this out a little bit for everybody. Okay, let me unmute Hans. I've just unmuted you, by the way, because you had a little background noise, but in case you want to chime in. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab that contract out there. So I have a transaction that I'm going to upload that file with. This is very straightforward. Okay, yes, it is a bit underwhelming, by the way, because when you upload a file, it just comes straight in. So here's my project file, and I'll say open, and then I'll say execute. So it's brought the file in, and in this case, I had to do two things. One is I had to create a sales order for me, but more importantly, I had to create the sales contract at the same time. So So the RA contract was created after 8587. So let's take a look at the RA contract that got created as a result of that. So now I'm going to go into the RA system. There we go. And just a moment, folks, while I get caught up with my system here. And let's take this off to the side. Okay, so here's how I found my RA contract out there. So let's take a look at it and see what was created. Okay, so I can see here that there were two RA contracts created. One is the IFRS compliant one, and one is the US GAAP one created. And let's take a look and see what was done. And there we go. So here is my contract. It got created in the system out there. And all I did was I brought that Excel file straight in. So if I look at that Excel file again, just to bring that in so people can kind of compare and contrast. So what we did is we loaded that straight in. Here it is right there. We just loaded that straight in. And if I kind of look and I overlay here, I can see there's four performance obligations created because I had 4 phases coming in here. And then I indicated there was 2 on this particular phase, by the way, which is why it doubled up on the price. So you're wondering why is that one 50,000? And then I have the other phases that are in there. So very clean, very straightforward, went straight into the system, nothing special I had to do. And at this point now, I can actually maintain this particular performance obligation. So let's say that for this particular phase here, I'm going to manually fulfill a performance obligation. So I've highlighted it here. And now I'm going to say it's 100% done. So now that I've got it over here, I can say, yep, we did both components to that. And then I'll say fulfill this. So now you're looking at a second aspect of this one is I got it in over the fence, so to speak. And now what I can do, let's just refresh this schedule here. If I go to the revenue schedule at the very top up here, it'll show me what fulfillment actually did. You can kind of see it in the columns here, but let's just go look at the revenue schedule. It's a little bit clearer picture for those that are looking. So right now I've got recognized revenue of $50,000 and I've got $75,000 outstanding. $75,000 is in this bucket called unscheduled. Unscheduled meaning it's waiting for something to happen. Percent completion, however I want to indicate that, it's waiting for me to do that. And then RA also gives me an interesting statistic, and that is based on the total contract value of $125,000. It says, of the revenue that's been recognized or posted, I'm 40% through. So a nice little stat to see that. You're looking at the status columns here, and I'll hover over the light gray one, and what that means is it's recognized but not posted. So basically what we've done is we're saying it's recognized, and the next time we do a posting run, this will be updated into the GL. In fact, if we get a chance, we will actually run that posting so you folks can see what that looks like in the system here. Okay, so that's it as far as we take that contract. We could take in various flavors of a contract too. So let's take a look at another flavor of this contract here that we are going to bring in, this Excel file. The second flavor that we're going to be bringing in looks something like this, and I'll bring it up for you. And the difference is it's got just 2 line items. So no great shakes, just 2 line items. We'll change that quantity to 1 here. And that's it. Very good. Okay, so now we're going to bring that file in, and let's just go back over to my SAP system here. Here we go. So we're going to load that particular file in, Z Project 3. There it is. Open that one, and we'll say execute. And now it's brought it in. So that one had 2 project lines. So let's look at the created revenue contract as a result of that one there. So let's just go a little further. Let's go look at my revenue contract lookup screen. look at this particular revenue contract here, and I can see that this one's going to have 2 line items associated with it at $25,000. Again, if I look at the revenue schedule, I can see that my contract is there, sitting ready to go. Nothing's been recognized at this point. We're waiting for percentage completion of different aspects. So just a quick little way to look at it. We're driving this through ECC, by the way. Now let's talk about, let's do the same kind of thing now in a little bit different flavor. So when I indicated that we were going to do this in kind of 2 flavors, let's talk about what that second flavor is. So we brought that project file in, very straightforward, had 4 items in it. We brought another one in that had 2. When we brought it in, an order was created and then it was automatically moved into RA. We didn't need to do it that way. We did it that way for because we have another demo related to how we use this. Now I'm going to show you a little bit slightly different examples. So, and in this too, we did an Excel file to RA, and then we did some contract maintenance directly in the revenue accounting module. So I just went from file and then went to RA, and I did my update there. So one example before we go to the next one here, and I think, Hans, are you on the line now?
Yes, I am.
Very good. So before we go to the next one, I thought we'd just talk about a sort of example case study of what we've been out there and how they handled the file and why they had to do that particular aspect. Hans?
Yeah, so the example that you can see here is from Telecoms, because Telecoms obviously is one of the most involved or most impacted sectors by the new guidelines. And so the reason why we put these slides in here is because we wanted to just show there's like obviously a lot of complexity in the landscapes, right? So for telecoms, for instance, you might have data files coming from billing systems, pricing systems, commissions, inventory, and so on. So all kinds of cases. In this example here, we've actually got 2 different ECC landscapes, right? So that might be an added complication. And then the question is obviously, how do you actually turn that into files? Now we have actually kind of like the simpler example shown by Chris, right? And that is what we're going to do once we have the files. But obviously the data acquisition, how to transform the data. So in database speak, the ETL layer, right? The data hub. That is obviously there's multiple different options, and we could have shown you like half a dozen or a dozen different landscape slides just for telecoms, right? So you need some kind of like data hub, data layer in between, and that's specifically true for telecoms, which have the giant telecoms, which have enormous data volumes, which typically have actually kind of like a bifurcation between a HANA landscape just for ECC and BW, and another HANA instance just for RAR. So that's basically what this shows here. And then do we have a separate slide now? Another one? Did we bring the other one? So that's just outlining it a little bit more, the data layer. Yeah, so and one of the options obviously is, and we being that close and as much as we love SAP, we have no problems featuring that, is obviously what SAP calls its data services. So again, it's just a slightly different view on that. So we're doing the data profiling and then the data provisioning, as HANA calls that, right? And there's a lot of steps in there. First we obviously get the data in some kind of readable format. We get to standardize it. We get to validate it. We sometimes have to complete it. We might have reconciliation to do, right? And then eventually the data will be brought into the HANA. If it's 2 separate instances, then the HANA instance specific to RAR. And so for those of the customers who are on the call here that are on really big implementations, big environments, that is what you're probably also already looking at. And we have had at Brahmasol, we have looked at multiple of these specifically in the telecom sector because they are a little bit ahead of the curve, but we have also already seen some in the high-tech sector. We're discussing some of those with giant high-tech companies. So that's basically what you have to go through. What we're doing here, but in the end, maybe to make the circle back to Chris, in the end, what you're coming out of all of these is you're coming out with a file that is very, very similar in content to what Chris has shown you, which is basically just a data file. Either it's the order information, or it is the billing information, or it's the fulfillment information, because that's really the type of information that that RAR looks for. Yeah, and there specifically, right, Chris has outlined that, so there's flat files can come in directly, right? Excel is the example we'll be looking at, and obviously also from different software providers. And this also makes it possible for us, obviously, to offer or to discuss with you if you're interested in the cloud offering. So basically have kind of like a mini SAP ERP basis, right? And then on top of that, just load RAR and integrate that with non-SAP systems outside. So that goes also back to this question with the adapter reuse layer that Chris has introduced to you on a conceptual level. Okay, so maybe back to Chris. Yeah. Thank you.
Very good, Hans. Thank you so much, by the way. And yep.
Yeah, two quick questions. So really, so that means that by using these formats and this tool, it really doesn't matter. What you're saying is it really doesn't matter what platform you're on, whether it's a competitive platform or, for example, customers who aren't on the latest enhancement pack 5 of SAP. They're maybe on an old version. They can use this same process to use RAR as an engine all by itself.
That's right, John. Very good observation. Yes, I appreciate you for bringing that in. Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Wow.
Yeah,
hey,
we're doing kind of like various scenarios, right? So we're talking about just offering it as a standalone solution, but we're also doing things where we basically jumpstart a project. We'll probably have more of that, given that some people come to the table a little bit later. So where we're basically saying, okay, for interim purposes, we can bring up a system to do a POC and maybe the first customizations, the first pieces, right? And then you might transfer that back to your on-premise or some other solution. But there's different scenarios on how to do that, how to use that. But exactly, yeah.
Oh, wow. Hey, there was another question, Chris, real quick. You know, you showed an example of one project that we loaded. Can you load multiple projects in the same spreadsheet into the system?
Yeah, the question is absolutely. There is no limitation, and we just happened to limit it to one so that in demo land, we didn't make it too complex. However, that's a good one to note, John, for a future webinar where we'll just load like 10 or 20 RA contracts out of one Excel file, just so people can see that happens and all the contracts that get created simultaneously. So we just kept it to one just because of demo land, keep things sort of relatively straightforward and clean so people can follow the flow, but there's no restriction on, other than file sizes, of course, there's no restrictions on the number of contracts you can bring in via that technique.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. Okay.
Okay, onward. So this next one we're going to take is a little bit different than that one. And the other one we were kind of flashing in and out of ECC. And in fact, we were creating a sales order and then moving that order over. This one here, we're bypassing SAP altogether. So we're just taking a file, and these are the three files. One is a setup file that creates the RA contract. The second one is where there's a fulfillment occurred in the other system. It was, in other words, the device was activated or shipped or whatever. And then the third one is there was a billing that took place, so we get to see Excel from that perspective. So the RA contract looks something like this. So I loaded this in the first step. So still file one's been loaded. And this is what it looks like. So it's a media device with 6 months of subscriptions associated with it. And you can see right now it has recognized revenue of $1244. And you can see there the allocated revenue for the device has not been fulfilled. So let's run that fulfillment step now to see what that looks like. So here we are now, and I'm actually going to execute the fulfillment step. Now, I want to point out one thing too. We're using a transaction, by the way, that is standard with the system. So this is a kind of a sample upload utility that you can use that SAP provides with RA, so you can get a sense of how to work with Excel as an upload and download vehicle, AKA, and then go to a file. So it'll actually not only load a file, but it'll generate the template for you. So we're just going to grab the one out there that we have. Let's go to scenario 2, and this one is the fulfillment one. So I'm actually kind of interacting with how the file looks. So it's a little bit different than the way I just took. Now that I can see the data sets here, you can see there's even tabs here. I'll save this, and it's going to do an evaluation of the data set and let me know if everything's okay. And at this point, I can say, okay, simulate the load and see if it's going to be okay. And green's good. So right now it's good. So at this point now, we're going to execute. And what it did is it executed that against the RA system. So if I go back to my RA screen, and right here, if I do a refresh, I should see that now showing as delivered. And let me just do a refresh here one more time.
So do you have the auto switch on for the RAR creation?
Oh, yep, one step. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe I can talk a little bit about over
yeah,
that.
You talk about that. I'm going to go one more step here, by the way. We didn't have the auto switch turned on. The auto switch then says, let's specifically move the contract from the intermediate state over. We're going to do that. Let me just one more step here. Normally automated, just did that. Everybody out in demo land's going, yeah, that's right, sure. No, it does work. Let's hit refresh at this point. And now you can see this has gone to automatically delivered. That explicit transfer step, by the way, we have it manually right now, particularly for demos, just so that you can show that you move it from SAP's intermediate hold state into the actual RA system formally, but typically that's automated, so we don't have to do that manually. But just to give you an example, so there you saw the file come across. Let's do the same thing again. Thanks, Hans. Let's do the same thing again with the invoice file. So now we're going to bring in the file that indicates that we're doing an invoice step. And let's bring in the sheet that represents the invoice itself. So let's upload that one. So now we're going to indicate that this item has been billed or invoiced. And I get a chance to look at the data sets. Yep, looks about right here. Let me save it to get it ready to go. And again, I can go simulate, say, hey, if everything goes right, yep, green's good. And then I'll hit create, and now it's actually going to move it over. And you want to describe this step here while I get ready for the RA transfer, Hans?
Yeah, so the step obviously is always you have to first create revenue accounting items. Revenue accounting items are basically the content that you create RA contract and POBs, and then the values for those out of, right? So what we're doing in the first step is basically that there is a structure in the system that basically is driving the template that we load the Excel file into, and that loads then these field contents, and that is then being brought in as a RAR. So that's the create step that Chris just executed, and then we have it as a RAR, and then we have to process that RAR. And as Chris said, I mean, this is a little bit multi-step. But I think it's actually not bad to demo that. It's actually good to demo that, because you have to understand that there's multiple steps in processing that the system goes through. And from doing that multiple times, you will then better understand if something goes wrong, why it went wrong, where you have to look for something going wrong, right? And the transaction where you load the Excel file actually has the same layout as here as the RAR monitor itself, so where you can look at it. So you can directly see what the problem is if there's some issue with the file and so on. Right.
Okay, so at this point,
yeah, well, go ahead.
At this point, I injected the billing here, and just let's look at what's happened now to our revenue contract that's been created underneath here. And let me just do that refresh here. So what you'll see here is this column here is now showing it has been invoiced. These two, it had two items that it actually invoiced right here and here. So it updated it, indicating the status of these items as actually invoiced. So when I look at the customer, I can see, okay, the money was actually sent, there was an invoice sent to the customer, or I did an internal invoicing or billing movement myself, and now RA was tracking with the fact that I actually took that or did that activity out there. Hans, did you want to comment about the invoice step?
Well, so the invoice step, there are some specifics to that on the data side, obviously, because there might be different currencies. You might have changes in the currency steps and so on. There could also be actually impacts on the contract, like for instance, if you invoice more than the original transaction price was, the assumption how that much that would be, it would actually update the overall transaction value of that contract and then reallocate. The way we've done it here is basically we've invoiced exactly the way we expected to invoice, right? So we pulled in the data from the invoice step, and well, that just updates as invoice on the revenue schedule. And then obviously there would be accounting implications potentially if something, for instance, had been posted or would otherwise be posted as unbilled, right? So because obviously now it's billed, right? So that's slightly different accounting there. The system does all of those deferred postings, the postings to the balance sheet and so on, automatically, right? But obviously the system in the RAR, system needs the information from the file from the operational systems.
So the next step here is we're bringing in another contract net new from a file here, and this is the but that in the file, this is the contract header. I'll do a search, and it should say no results, right? So nothing's found for this particular contract header right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute that, and then it's in that structure that Hans was just referring to, and now we'll move that formally into the RA module itself. There we go. And so now come over here. If I hit search again, it'll have the two RA contracts created, one for IFRS and one for GAAP. And now that file, that RA contract is created from that Excel file. And I can take a look at that here. And see, here it is. It's similar products, by the way, but it's the media device and the media service, again, set up and created from that file directly. So nothing on the SAP side other than we used it as the transfer vehicle to bring it across. Similarly, by the way, and I'm just kind of watching our time, folks, we could then do the same steps here where I bring in the next file in the case, which would be fulfillment. And maybe we can do that just real quick. And I'm going to go through the steps just real quick so you can just see what it looks like when you just kind of smooth it out. So here's one that's saying, okay, here's the indication of fulfillment for that particular item, meaning it's been activated or shipped, however we want to indicate it to the customer. We'll save that, add to our system, and then I'll create that, and that sounds good. And then we'll just say, okay, let's formally move that now into the accounting system here, and then we'll do an update on our contract, and we should see that out there. So there's the fulfillment process for that particular step. That's great. So when I go in here and look at this particular device, you'll see recognized changed. If I hit refresh, there we go. You'll see now I've got 100. I know it's kind of some fine print there, but 124.38 means that that device has now been recognized because it's been indicated as delivered, and that was just by updating a file directly into the RA module. Okay, so let's take a look at what we did. So we brought the device in, it had some dates in there. The term dates were brought straight over, so it was effective immediately. We created both the GAAP and IFRS contracts for ourselves. We did multiple Excel files just to give you an idea that each file can do an individual thing, as opposed to, I'm sending all the stuff that creates the contracts. Later on, as I do for my billing and invoicing engine, I'm sending that over, and that's updating RA contracts. I could do it all at once, by the way. But the other thing is you're also looking at, there's a supplied sample RA upload transaction that comes with the standard RA 1.1, so you can actually create these yourselves and start to look at them and see how you want to do it. By the way, the other thing to keep in mind is the analytics within the RA module, by the way. There's some pretty good analytics there. For those that haven't seen it before, I'll give you an example. This is allowing me to look at that same scenario where I can see what is my performance obligation by type and what's the revenue stream going forward. That's a standard analytic. But because I have everything in one place, I can do things like look at a dashboard of it. So here's just a simple dashboard saying planned revenue means it's waiting for time. So out there I have 150 million just waiting for some timer to tick off. Unscheduled means I've got 44 million sitting out there waiting for something to happen. Percent complete, activation indicated as delivered, all those kinds of things are different aspects that I'm waiting for out there. And I can look at this in different ways depending on what I'm doing. We happen to use Lumira. The only reason we're using Lumira, by the way, is it's an SAP product, but it also allows me to reach directly into the ECC system and report directly against those tables as opposed to going externally. Okay, and then just another kind of a dashboard. This one has what's called a tag cloud on the right, and that is the POB. It got itself a performance obligation type has a name, and the size of the name is indicative of the amount of revenue for the contract. There's different ways that we can look at the flavors out there. So because I have everything in the RA module, I have the ability to do that. The RA module can be fed externally. We've just looked at an example. It doesn't have to be SAP. We can do it from a file directly. And then let's talk about the steps that I mentioned earlier about proof of concept. And John, did you want to talk a bit about this?
Yeah, in a moment, Chris. Actually, this is great. I do have a question. Maybe you can talk to. So I think, folks, we've seen a great example from Chris and Hans as to how you can take the data and information from other systems, whether they're old SD contracts out of SAP, whether they are data from Oracle or other competing ERP systems, or even Excel spreadsheets and tools that you might use. Could you talk, Hans and Chris, I don't think I caught it, but could you talk a little bit about how the RAR engine feeds into? So we've talked about how things go into RAR. Can you talk a little bit about how things come out and how they can be fed back into other systems?
Certainly. Well, we talk about we've been looking at the inside. We didn't talk about the outside. So the way RAR will operate is it will update the general ledger accounts that you specified in your setup, and then from there you would then percolate externally outward to other charts of accounts or financial systems. There are various techniques to do that, and Hans, I think you're familiar with some of those other techniques. So you want to talk briefly about that?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, so the idea about the engine obviously is that the output is really financial, right? So obviously it has a certain set of data pieces in there that are directly kind of related and built into and integrated with standard SAP. For instance, the account determination, which is probably the biggest piece that you have to set up and connect, right, is obviously built on assumptions like company code, chart of accounts, period definitions as per company code and so on, but it does that basically to come up with the standard typical BAPI that is integrated into the journal journal entry, general ledger entry in SAP. If you have on that output side another system, well, you would have to just take a look at what data pieces you need, right, which would be, for instance, possibly also including specific CO or specific other reporting dimensions. And those would have to be included on the output side, right? And then you would have to basically grab the data where SAP normally expects the output for ERP to be done. The other way around that would be that you may be just posting it in that RAR instance to SAP FIGL, and then you basically do some kind of automated load or interface from that to the other financial system. As for the other information, so the non-financial or less financial, if you will, information, I mean, everything is financial in revenue recognition, but the less financial information SAP provides already standard info sets, info sources, right, for the for BW and so on, and those obviously can be adapted for other reporting systems. I think those are really the main streams, right? The one stream is accounting information, and the other stream is basically any other information or details or dimensions that you can have via BW. Right. I hope that answers it. Yeah.
Great, thanks, guys. Because I know, as I think about what we're trying to do here, and RAR is a standalone, it's as important to understand how things, things come out of it as go in, because that's what folks are doing. One of the things that we talk about at Bramisol is how do we get you up and running quickly, but how do we do it in a way that allows you to take that information and take what you're doing and leverage it going forward into your project. And what we have found is one of the ways that companies are doing that most effectively is through this concept of proof of concept or a pilot. And really, the benefits of doing a pilot are, number one, it helps you determine the overall impact to your company. And as Chris really stated in the beginning, it's not simply, folks, about, what's the impact to my IT systems and my SAP system, but really what's the overall impact to my company? What business processes have to change? How do I affect workflows? How might I look at commissions or other decisions that I'm making in my system? So you really get a great comparison of really what's happening and a better understanding of the business processes and the IT impact, as well as an understanding of how people need to be involved. A great other benefit is that you can take some of your key scenarios and really compare the old standards to the new standard and understand in a very side-by-side way what those financial impacts are and what the timing and what the other effects are. So it's a great way to do that. Because it's a standalone engine and because you can use multiple inputs, we showed you how to use an Excel file. It gives you a fast, easy way to really get informed as to how things work, and gives you a great way to understand, and like we said, we believe that this knowledge is power. It really empowers you to understand the true next steps and impact on your project. It gives you a nice way to evaluate alternatives. Some companies that we have looked or worked with look at their scenarios and really think about the impacts of those scenarios and the way they bundle things together, the way they time them, the way they price them, and try to understand really what's the best impact or what's the best way for them to model those scenarios so that it has the optimal cash flow impacts, P&L impacts, all of those different models. And by using a standalone tool like this, it's a great way to do that. Other companies have found that this standalone RAR engine is a great way to really get started quickly. We know of several companies who have investigated alternative revenue accounting systems. We won't talk about them specifically, but we know they're out there. And they have found that this is a great way, either once they found that the other system doesn't quite meet their needs, or they want to evaluate which one's more effective. Again, this is a great, great way for you to truly evaluate that process. And finally, for companies that are looking at different levels of upgrades or projects, this is another way for you to jumpstart the revenue accounting and be compliant as of January 1st, 2018, yet be able to reuse all of the processes, reuse all of the data structures and everything in a way that doesn't cause you to redo or re-implement. So, I recommend that you reach out to us. There are many ways for you to do that. You can come to our website. You can reach out to me directly through our marketing group. And we have plenty of different ways for you to do that. Frankly, the key points here, and I'll summarize these. Don't wait. For anybody who needs to get started now. As we've heard from some of the Big Four and the SEC, if you haven't started your project now and aren't moving, you're behind already. But this tool and our processes and methodologies can help you get at least back on track or pretty close to it. SAP RAR is the most robust tool out there. It not only provides the deepest amount of functionality of the tools, but it is also the most flexible. And I think you can see that flexibility through the fact that not only can you integrate with SAP, but you can integrate across many different platforms. And it can be driven completely externally, as we've seen. We can help you. We have done many projects. We are very well-versed in a number of different industries, including automotive, telco, high-tech, pharma, etc. So, we are here. We are the SAP Revenue Accounting RevRec experts. We have the expertise, the experience, and the knowledge and the processes to help you get started. So, thank you all. Chris, next slide. Again, I'll self-indulge for a moment. Please, if you are coming to Sapphire, we would love to see you there. Come by the booth. We will have full demos of a number of different scenarios. Both Hans and Chris will be there. And we look forward to seeing you. We are speaking, so you can see on the screen here that Thursday on May 19th, we will be speaking about the revenue accounting engine. You'll see some great productivity enhancements using Fiori, and you can get some tips and tricks that we've learned from the numerous different implementations that we have been able to do, and successful implementations. So again, I encourage you to come see that. engage with us, get your RevRec project started, and we'll see if there are any other questions. I know we're running pretty tight to our time frame, so I do have a couple of questions out there that are a little more technical, which I will have Hans and Chris answer for you folks in a subsequent email. So thank you, everybody. Chris and Hans, thank you again for a great session. Please, folks, take the time to answer the survey that we send out afterwards. This is as much for you as it is for any of us. And if you have some topics in mind or things that you'd like to see, please reach out to us and we'll schedule those for future webinars. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day, and always ask yourself, are you RevRec ready?